All right, this is section 5.1 in your notes. The instruction here is just say solve the equations. And all of these, we're pretty much just going to solve by factoring, which we've already been talking about factoring, so you should be relatively decent at it by now. But I'm going to burn through these real quick and just kind of show you what we're doing. Always start off by trying to divide out the greatest common factor. That is the first place to start every single time. Because if you can divide something out like this first one, we can divide out an r. We can factor out an r. Life gets easier. Not to mention you've divided out a factor already. So yeah, we've already got one factor right there, which we'll deal with in a second. And then we look at this and realize, oh, that's a perfect square, 1 is a perfect square, and there's a negative in the middle, so this is a difference of squares. So r, that's 6r minus 1, and 6r plus 1 equals 0. And now we got rid of all of our squared, cubes, fourths, all that sort of stuff. It's all just plain r's. So we're going to set them equal to 0. So r equals 0, 6r minus 1 equals 0, and 6r plus 1 equals 0. And so we've already got this one, the first one. This one we just add the 1, divide by 6, so r equals 6, not 6 over, r equals 1 over 6. And this one we move the 1 over, which, let me clean up the way that looks, because that's kind of hard to read. R, the last one was minus 1, so plus 1 equals 0. So subtract the 1 divided by 6, so r equals negative 1/6. So those are your three answers. R equals 0 and r equals plus or minus 1/6. Alright, now I'm not so much worried about, pardon me, about whether you do this section or not, whether you list it out as such, because many of you can look at this and go, oh, well, I moved the 1 divided by 6, that automatically is negative 1/6. And that's fine. But I do need to see you get down to this section right here. Once you get to here, if you don't physically write the next, that's okay. But if you need to write this area in here, please do. Alright? Don't skip it just because you don't feel like writing it. If you're going to mess it up without it, then don't. Then do it, I mean. Number 2. Alright, get everything to one side. Divide out the greatest common factor. So if I move everything to the left, I get, and put it in standard form, we got 20x cubed plus 80x minus 60x, plus 60x equals 0. And I can divide every last one of those by 20 and an x. Always look at the number and the variable, because sometimes you can do both. And again, life becomes easier. Then we go, so that's x squared plus 4x plus 3 equals 0. And since x squared is alone, there's nothing up here, we can say, or there's a 1 up there, I should say. We just think what multiplies to 3 but adds to 4. So we got x plus 3 and x plus 1. And if we set all three of those to 0, 20x equals 0, x plus 3 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0, we get x equals negative 3, negative 1, and 0. Alright, when you solve all three of those are the answers you get. Bing! Alright, number 3, same idea. Get everything to one side, see if you can divide something out. So, because the biggest one is on the right side, because the biggest exponent is on the right, I'm going to move everything to the right, because I like my biggest exponent to be positive. It's nothing that you have to do. It is simply a personal preference. Alright, so there's it just makes life easier for me, typically. I make fewer mistakes this way. You don't have to do it. If you want to move everything left, that's fine. You just get a negative 75 and a positive 3. But again, we can divide this by, what, 7 plus 5 is 12. So yeah, you can divide them both by 3, you can divide them both by an m squared. So 0 equals 3m squared. 75 divided by 3 is 25. M fourth divided by m squared is m squared. And negative 3m squared divided by 3m squared is negative 1. And oh look, that is a difference of squares. So 0 equals 3m squared, 5m minus 1, and 5m plus 1. So, yes, you have an m squared over here, and you know my general rule is like if you still have an m squared or cubed or fourth, you're not done. But since it's outside, it's out front, there's nothing added or subtracted to it, it's okay. It's just a double root. There's really nothing you can do about it. But you still got to set it equal to 0 and solve. So I got 3m squared equals 0. We got 5m minus 1 equals 0. And 5m plus 1 equals 0. And now don't let this one on the left mess with you. What do I do about the m squared? Well, think of it this way. Sorry, that's my wife just dying in the back. She's okay. Wow, I just lost my train of thought on that one. Sorry. On this first one right here, if we just divide by 3, you get m squared. Well, 0 divided by 3 is still 0. Get rid of the squared, you square root it. Alright, which you're right. When you square root to get rid of the squared, it's... Ooh, let's use the right color. When you square root to get rid of the square, it's you get two answers, plus or minus. Well, you get m equals plus or minus 0. Well, that's all the same thing. So it's just m equals 0 at that point. So don't let it mess with you. Alright, and then we do the other ones. We move the 1 and divide by 5 on both of them, so we get a positive 1/5 on one of them, and we get a negative 1/5 on the other one. If you want to list them out, you know, 1/5 and negative 1/5, that's fine, but you can always do it plus or minus 1/5. That takes care of both of them in one shot. So those are your answers. Number 4, and at this point you want to keep on going on your own and see what you can do, go for it. But I'm going to keep trekking. Feel free to pause if you think you can go. Again, get everything to one side, divide out greatest common factor. So we've got move y to the 4th. So we've got a positive y to the 4th minus 13y squared plus 36 equals 0. And we divide the greatest common factor, which this one actually you can't, because this one doesn't have a y and this one doesn't have a number. So there's nothing you can do. So here we go. Pull up your parentheses. Two things that multiply to y to the 4th are y squared and y squared. So what? And since there are, we want two things that multiply to 36 but add to negative 13, that's probably 9 and 4. Yeah, it's negative 4 and negative 9. 9 times 4 is 36, and negative 9 minus 4 is negative 13. And oh, look, both of those are difference of squares. So here we go. The first one is y minus 2, y plus 2, and the other one is y minus 3, and y plus 3 equals 0. And if you set them equal to 0, this is one of those reasons. I say you don't have to write this section because by this point you might already have the answer in your head. But if you don't, here we go. Y plus 3 equals 0. So you solve all of them, you get a negative 2, you get a positive 2 and a negative 2, so y equals plus or minus 2, and you get a positive 3 and a negative 3, so y equals plus or minus 3. And those are your answers. Alright, for the last two on the page, the last two for this recording, again, everything to one side, start factoring. So for this one, move the 1, we've got 2x cubed minus x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 0. And then we're going to try and divide out. For this one, I'm going to factor this one by grouping. So, again, factoring by grouping real quick. Remember, we're going to take the first two and we're going to take the last two. And we're going to divide out what we can to see if we can get the same two factors. So for the first one, I'm going to divide out an x squared. So 2x cubed divided by x squared is 2x. Negative x squared divided by x squared is negative 1. The only thing left over is the negative. And you already noticed this one already has a 2x and a 1 in it, which is kind of nice. But the signs are different, so I'm going to divide out a negative 1. So that leaves me with 2x minus 1. Feel free to pause and stare at that if you need to. And then again, we're going to divide out what we can as well. So both of these are being multiplied by a 2x minus 1. So we're going to divide out a 2x minus 1. No one says you can't divide out an entire polynomial. Then we got x squared minus 1. We got x squared minus 1 left over. The x squared and the minus 1 of the coefficients. Equals 0. And we still have an x squared, so we got to check to see if we can go further. And the answer is yes, we can, because that one is a difference of squares. The square root of 1 is 1, so we got x minus 1 and x plus 1, because those multiply to negative 1 and add up to that 0 in the middle. And when you set them equal to 0, you get x equals 1/2 and plus or minus 1. Those are your answers. All right. Last but not least, again, get everything to one side. And like I said earlier, I'm going to move everything to the right because I like my leading coefficient to be positive. If you don't remember what leading coefficient is, refer back to section 5.1. Leading coefficient is the coefficient of the biggest exponent. Anyways, so here we go. Move it into one side. So I'm going to go 0 equals 8c to the third power plus 20c squared minus 50c minus 125. Yep. So 0 equals, and I'm going to try difference of squares on this one as well. It may not work, but just from looking at it, it looks like it might. So the first one, I'm going to divide out a 4c squared. That's the biggest number I can pull out, and the biggest variable I can pull out. 8 divided by 4 is 2. C cubed divided by c squared is c. 20 divided by 4 is 5. And c squared divided by c squared is 1, so those cancel out. And on the right, I'm going to divide by, because I want to get my negatives straight, I want this to become positive, like the other one, so I'm going to divide out a negative. And let's try 25. So negative 50 divided by negative 25 is positive 2, and the c comes down. Negative 125 divided by negative 25 is positive 5. And yay! It worked. We have the same two factors right there. So here we go. When you divide out your 2c plus 5, you get 2c plus 5, and then your coefficients, 4c squared minus 25, which we still have a c squared, a variable squared, so we may not be done. And since both of those are perfect squares, here we go. 2c plus 5, we got 2c minus 5 and 2c plus 5, which you notice we have the same one twice. That's okay. And if you want to, you can write this as a 2c plus 5. Let me erase those long. Write this as a 2c plus 5 squared. If you were to write it in factored form, that's what you would do. You'd write it like that. But it's okay. We're going to leave it like this. Since it's that way, we only have to write it once. So 0, let's not use the eraser. 0 equals 2c plus 5 equals 0. And 2, no, not 0 equals, I'm sorry. 2c plus 5 equals 0, and 2c minus 5 equals 0. So one equals 5 halves, and the other equals negative 5 halves. And there you are.